Hello, everyone, and welcome to Beginnings, the show that asks, where do creative people come from? My name is Andy. I'm the host of the show and a writer and performer based in Los Angeles, California. Great episode today. This is Mariah Parker, a.k.a. Linqua Franqa. If you don't know who they are, why don't I read you their bio right now? Originally from Louisville, Kentucky, rapper, academic, and politician, Mariah Parker wears many hats. As an academic, they earned their master's in linguistics at the University of Georgia in 2017 and are currently a doctoral student in language and literacy education at the university. As an activist and politician, Mariah ran for and won county commissioner in District 2 of Athens, Georgia, and as a rapper, they've released two wonderful albums, Model Minority in 2018 and their latest Bell Ringer, which was just released on Ernst Jennings Record Co. Great. So I start out this one talking, like I do sometimes, about the quality of my brain being poor, kind of as a preface to say, hey, if my questions don't make sense, that's why. I'm not really sure what was going on at the time of the recording. I'm assuming I didn't sleep the night before, which is not fucking new for me. Standard operating procedure. So after the first IPCC report came out, that's the climate change one, and it was around the same time that the government gave up on COVID, I would say the quality of my emotional life was not great. I crawled into a little pit of despair, and I'm just climbing my way out of it now, but not that the sleep's much better on this side. I guess, I don't know. Maybe that's just growing older? I'm not sure. Anyway, despite my brain atrophying at the time of our talk, Mariah is great. I hope I was a coherent interlocutor for them. I think so. I think I'm maybe being too hard on myself. But anyway, both of Mariah's albums are wonderful. Bell Ringer just came out last week. I've been listening to it daily. That's how good it is. So I hope you check out those albums, and I hope you like our talk. And if you do, and you want to check out other episodes of Beginnings, I've been doing this for 12 years. I like to do a little recommended if you like here in the beginning. If you like my talk with Mariah, maybe you like my talk with other people from the world of hip-hop, such as Jean Grey, Samus, Open Mike Eagle, No Can Do, Psalm 1, Cadence Weapon, and you know what? Hundreds of other writers, musicians, thinkers. Give me another category. Artists, comedians. What else can I tell you here in the beginning? I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Andy Beckerman. I laugh because Twitter is turning into just a absolute garbage app at this point. I'm trying to just, look, if you follow me, you will just get basically stupid jokes, dumb-looking photoshops, and, you know, posts about this show and couples therapy, my other show. I'm trying to make Twitter exactly like it was about 10 years ago. Just dumb jokes. I'm losing the battle, but that's what I'm trying. And if you like Beginnings, you can subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcast from. I've got some fantastic episodes coming up, including a bunch of episodes with really great comics creators like Kelly Thompson, Mike Allred, and Ryan North. Musicians like Front Person, which is a band that includes Catherine Calder from the New Pornographers, also Powwow singer Joe Rainey, and a ton of other great people. Just today, I talked to Casper Kelly, brilliant writer, has worked on so many Adult Swim shows, and just a really nice dude. So stay tuned for those episodes, but for now, let's talk to Mariah. I just want this on the record that my brain is moving slow so that if there is, I mean, obviously, look, if I'm searching for a word as we're talking, the listener, when they eventually hear it, that's all those pauses and uhs and ums are going to be cut out.
It's going to be like Jeopardy, where they're like yelling at the podcast, like, "Oh, you're trying to think of this word."
The word is the. Why could he not think of the article the? I'm very excited to talk to you, though, for a number of reasons. Your existence is at the crossroads of so many of my own, what's the word I'm looking for? I was going to say obsessions, but more than that, like existential, deep things inside of me, both music and I suppose revolutionary politics and academia, as I used to be a philosophy professor. So,
oh, word. I mean, I just like the idea of staying in academia, like it makes me feel like I'm having a stroke. So good for you that you stuck it out and like did the thing.
For
a time, you know.
I got kicked out. I don't want to go into the whole story, but basically like kicked out for basically, I've never found a good succinct way of saying this. They wanted me to do one thing, and right before my dissertation, they wanted me to do one thing, and I did not want to do what they wanted me to do, and so I did my own thing. And they were like, I remember the reviews of like I had to write 2 publishable quality papers, and they're like, he knows what he's doing. Why is he not doing the thing we want him to do? And so they
because you know what you're doing and doing what you think is best because you know what you're doing. I don't.
Well, I'm curious because your master's is in linguistics.
That's correct.
Your PhD is in
language and literacy education.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm really curious about like what linguistics. I just talked to someone on the show who had an advanced degree in like computer linguistics. I forget the exact term.
Computational linguistics.
Computational linguistics. Thank you. And the thing that bothered me about philosophy, at least the way it's taught in the U.S., is that it is very logic focused.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. I've had many friends consider or pursue advanced degrees in philosophy. It's really struggle with that fact when they're more interested in like critical theory and things like that.
That's exactly it. I remember like when I was in undergrad, and this is decades ago at this point, and I was taking philosophy courses, and we were doing a course on identity. And the course on identity is about numerical identity. It's how do you know you're one person and not 2 people or something like that. And I wrote a paper. Well, that's it. I wrote a paper. I'm like, hey, shouldn't we be worrying about like other factors like race and ethnicity and sexuality and gender and all this kind of stuff? And this is back like
and how these things are actually constructed socially. Yeah. Well, excuse me. Yeah. That's bananas.
Like we're like again, where I'm just like it's like isn't that what's important? Like I couldn't wrap my head around it, and then I kept pursuing it for some reason, knowing that there was something better out there, but I kept being told that it wasn't. I'm sorry that I am babbling so much at the beginning of this. This is all preface to say that I'm curious about your own journey into academia and what is the foundation that has led you to where you are now? That's basically the thrust of the show anyway, so.
Yeah, I mean, it's partly like if I'm going to be broke, I might as well like be broken in school. And partly, you know, I would consider myself a person with like a deep intellectual curiosity. I love to learn. Even when I wasn't in school, like my time between undergrad and graduate school, like I just voraciously read, love studying other languages, you know, self-taught Spanish, Portuguese and stuff like that. So, you know, when I got to Athens, I was like working at a print shop making $18.50 an hour, or $8.50 an hour rather. $18.50 would have been sick. $8.50 an hour. I'm like, man, if I'm going to make like $15,000 a year, like pushing paper versus making the same amount of money, like to have my degree paid for, like, okay, let's go. And I mean, it's kind of simple as that, but I guess in terms of where my intellectual curiosity came from, I studied, you know, English and creative writing in undergrad. I got a minor in Spanish. I worked at the writing center. I was a writing tutor, and particularly that experience of like helping people believe in their writing and like see themselves as writers and fall in love with writing was a really powerful experience because I'd meet so many like brilliant students that who thought they were dumb because they were getting C's on their paper because they didn't know how to like make their ideas cohere in paragraphs and, you know, introductions and conclusions, etc. And so moving someone through that process of like, here's how to make your papers better, and then they get an A and they're like, wow, I am smart. I'm like, yeah, you were smart this whole time, was insane. It was incredible. And so I've also been on this path of pursuing like what that knowledge means in the larger trajectory of my life and career-wise. And so I got my master's in linguistics, interested at first in teaching foreign languages as a, Portuguese speaker, then getting more into educational sociolinguistics. So thinking about the way that we can honor language variation in the classroom. There's a lot of different dialects spoken in the United States alone. And the only difference between a dialect and a language is like a language has an army, right? A dialect doesn't. And so how do we honor African-American vernacular English, or what we call, quote unquote, broken English spoken by non-native speakers from Colombia? How do we even honor the dialectal variation of like people in the South who folks think are dumb because they got a drawl in their voice? But again, like those kids I taught in college can be very smart. They just don't communicate the quote unquote right way. Yeah. So I got into that a little bit. And then decided again to stay in Athens because I was like, if I don't know what I'm gonna do with this dumb degree now, so I guess I'll just stay in school forever so I don't have to pay my loans back. And also learning is fun. So Here I am in my 5th year of my PhD in language and literacy education. And so this journey to where I am now with that is, I think, maybe the opposite or parallel in some ways, or intersect some ways with what you were talking about with philosophy. So I started out writing my dissertation trying to do something very safe. It was like a methodology that I had used a lot. It was very like quote unquote rigorous and, precedented in the field, and like miserable, hated it. Just for a year, all of 2021, just like didn't work on it because I thought it was dumb, but like what I had to do to like get the extra letters at the end of my name. And then recently, one of my professors that dabbles in arts-based research came to one of my shows, and she was like, yo, you should submit that as your dissertation. And I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, I don't have no idea. I had heard about like A.D. Carson, who was studying rhetoric at the University of Virginia and like submitted a rap dissertation about like, I don't know. I just like had such a limited imagination of like what counts as scholarship, what counts as knowledge. And so I'm now writing the intro chapter to my dissertation, which is Bellringer, explaining like how it is like it's epistemology, how I'm arguing I can know what I know through writing the album, how it's precedented by scholars that are calling for kind of messy qualitative research that gets at those subjective realities that you can't really pin down through like quantitative studies, etc. And like what it means for teaching, what does it mean for how you can teach through hip hop? Because typically hip hop has been brought into classrooms to like get you to like Shakespeare or whatever. But I'm arguing that like, no, hip hop for hip hop's sake can be educational in these ways. And this is like how like a demonstration of that. So that's where I'm at now. But like, yeah.
Do you mind if I ask just a little more about this? Because I'm wondering, do you have people, besides this one professor, do you have people on your side? Like, is your dissertation committee okay with this? I'm just thinking about like how stodgy and status quo-y my department was. And is it like, do you have people that are actually like okay with you deviating from like what the standard dissertation looks like? Do you have like, are they just like white moderates who are just like scared to say like, this is I
won't speak to like their moderation politically.
But do you know what I mean? Like they're like they won't like they're gonna like, they may not agree with it, but they don't want to look like they are unhip or something like that.
I'm very grateful for their like deep sense of curiosity. I don't think anybody understands exactly how this is going to work out, but they're like, let's see if you can pull this off for real. They're willing to like give me a chance while there might be some underlying skepticism. So that like willingness to like to see, to like, find out, I'm very, very thankful for. So
yeah,
I don't know. They might think I'm full of bullshit and like whatever, but they just like okay, we'll see if you can do it. I don't know. We'll see if I pass. So
yeah, I mean, look, most of academia is full of bullshit. So like, if sorry, to the listener, I threw up my hands in the air in a shrugging gesture.
Yeah, so. Not like Black Eyed Peas, like put your hands like no, like a
Yeah, like exactly like the emoji.
Yes.
Yeah.
Indeed.
No, I found academia to be a powerfully conservative organization. That's not the word I'm looking for, but you know what I mean.
It's bananas. It's bananas that like right-wing pundits try to pose like higher education as this like radical liberal space. When a lot of academia is very conservative, particularly if you look at who's like running things around here, in a state like Georgia, like Sonny Perdue, like a stop the steal Trump Republican guy who I don't think has ever taught or not for long is like now chancellor of the university system of Georgia.
Sure.
So like, I think they overestimate how radical it is. I wish it was radical as they said it is, you know?
Yeah, that would be great. I remember.
Sick. Yeah, let's go.
In undergrad, I took this poli-sci course about war. And it was like, in retrospect, one of the dumbest classes I've ever had. Because it was just like figuring out like what leads to war. But it wasn't like looking at like cultural and socio-political and economic things. It was like looking at it was looking at different factors, and it's like, if two countries have 5 of these factors, then they will go to war. It was like this kind of like very like, I want to just come up with an equation and turn my brain off. But it was taught by this guy who, like, in retrospect, was an extremely conservative, I'm going to assume, like, right-wing guy that only, like, he never said that, but only in being in left politics spaces do I now see the language he was using for what it was.
Yeah.
And that's not atypical. That was not atypical of my undergrad experience.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I think it is like a liberalizing force to just be around different kinds of people, which happens to folks for the first time when they go to college often, or be exposed to new and different ideas. Like that alone, development of critical thinking will do it to you. It's not like I've never like read Marx or anything. Like, you know, I just like have met a lot of different people and like learned, like heard about a lot of different kinds of stuff. That'll do it. That'll do it for you.
There's also a lot of Marx podcasts you can listen to at this point. So you're
sure.
You're
Yeah.
But what led you into linguistics in the first place? Just the idea of like you knew Portuguese, you knew Spanish, and you wanted to teach language, or was there something else beyond the kind of like occupational desire?
Yeah. I mean, again, crimes of necessity. I was living in Athens, working at a diner and a print shop, and so I applied to the University of Georgia's linguistics program because it was adjacent to the stuff that I was interested in. I wish I had a fancier answer than that. I'm so glad. I mean, like,
there's no fancier. It doesn't matter.
I like, have like, as a student of English and therefore having studied a lot of literature, like did not realize my underlying curiosity was about like the mechanics of language, not just like illusion and like character development, but like the gears, the cadence and meter and sonority and grammar and phonetics, right? Like just the Lego pieces that we can build these insane, Star Wars ships out of. So, that was like, I guess, the intellectual drive, even though it was only somewhat like adjacent to what my ultimate goals were at the time.
Uh-huh. How is linguistics taught these days? Is it taught just in terms of like the little atomic pieces put together, or is there a larger symbolic understanding and a larger cultural understanding that is part and parcel of linguistic theory these days?
Yeah, I mean, when you start out, they do take you through, like, separating the yellows and the reds in the Lego set of, like, phonetics, looking at, like, what a sound looks like in a sound wave when you analyze speech, and all the different sounds that are possible in human languages or exist in human languages. And then when you do syntax, you, like, study Chomsky and make these grammar trees to understand the, like, universal grammar of existing languages. But then once you get into more advanced study, they do get into like the role of context on semantics, like the difference between, oh, you're going over there? I'm like, oh, you're going over there. As well as like, I don't know, like reference, if you're like, oh, for example, me and my husband, if I'm like, hey, have you seen him? I'm obviously talking about our son. Like we don't need to, there's like these shared forms of knowledge that you don't have to communicate in order to communicate. So you get into more contextual and social variable factors of it. But they start you off on like, so 1 and 1 is 2, and then 2 and 2 is 4. And a way I still found fascinating, but like, I'm glad only because it led me later to like the juicier like more human parts of it.
Yeah, I didn't have the patience. I would have had to wait till I got tenured to really do that stuff. And I didn't have the patience to like go through an entire dissertation and then just write like nice little papers about Aristotle until eventually I got tenured in that, I guess, what's that, 15, 20 years? If I could even, the job market for philosophy collapsed, basically.
Yeah.
So.
And that's why I'm like, good for you for having like given it a shot, like trying to get into academia, because like, I've been like touring, I had a baby, I work in government, like I ain't been like presenting at conferences and publishing. I'm like, why would you even do that? Like, especially like if you're broke, like the graduate school doesn't like barely covers anything for your travel. So you're paying out of pocket. Out of your $15K, they pay you to teach classes, to like fly across the country and like talk to a room maybe full of 3 people about your research. Like, nah, I'm not about that. And so so a part of it is like, I don't know if you've ever like rejected someone thinking that they're going to reject you. So I'll reject you first. So I'm like, I'm not even going to try to be a professor because I like know the job market would be like utterly brutal to me. I ain't trying to play that. So
wait, I want to go back to Louisville, but I also was thinking a lot about municipal politics. So I'm in DSA and...
Word, me too. Yeah, oh. DSA, baby. I'm actually speaking at the YDSA conference in Chicago next month. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. That's so cool. And we've gone hard in on electoralism. And on a local level, I found it to be fantastic. Like, we've gotten people into city council and they've started to make a difference. It's tough because LA City Council is very... Well, I won't get into it. I'm kind of curious from your point of view, being in municipal politics, do you see actual avenues for change?
I hate to like keep it 100 with people, but like not really. I don't think local governments are like, unless you're like willing. So this is something that I think local governments should do more, but it's like unprecedented kind of from my understanding. It's like we need to be willing to like break laws as like, at scale, like as a government, to like get the right thing done at times, because like a local government up against like billions in corporate like capital for like in the housing market, like the fuck are we gonna do? Right. Like going up against like the police prison industrial complex, which is a billions of industry worth billions and billions of dollars. Like, what are we gonna do? I think we've accomplished really like transformative things like at a lower scale. So like we made the buses free and free forever like recently. And so like that's going to like improve, that's going to improve thousands of lives in Athens. But like, that's not good enough for me. So if we're thinking like, as folks who want a world, like a socialist world, a local government isn't really where you can do that. You can reduce suffering, which I think is a useful endeavor. But you can also, as an elected official, you have a very unique platform that others don't. And so I kind of try to think about how I can use the bully pulpit to elevate liberatory ideas additionally and shift narratives in places where I can't win. Or can't win right now. And so there's that to it. I think that the act of running a campaign, we talk about like class struggle elections as an opportunity as well to like elevate new ideas, going knocking door to door and talking to people about the way things could be. Yeah. But also tying it to this like civic exercise that people are very familiar with. Like it's hard to get people motivated around an issue campaign or just like go out and organize your community just to see what's up. Because they don't teach you about that in high school. And they don't teach you about that in high school on purpose because they will never give you the tools you need to overthrow them. So, but voting, they teach you about going to vote, right? And so like, okay, let's hijack this very familiar like civic exercise to like advance ideas and also like build community, build organizer skills among folks that will ultimately need to win in other ways. So I think that's kind of the utility of electoral politics, at least at the local level.
Have you seen pushback? This is the thing that I've been very obsessed with lately, which is as we start making moves in Los Angeles specifically to push these kinds of politics, these left politics, right? Yeah. We haven't seen a lot of pushback yet, but we're starting to. And I'm trying to think about like, well, we need to, I mean, look at what happened with like Bernie in the national election, where like Obama calls Buttigieg and Klobuchar and asks them to drop out, and that's the end. Like they're going like, if we start really changing things, there is going to be a lot of pushback from Capitol, from the ruling elite type.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm wondering, in your own experience, have you started to see that?
Bruh. So we decennial redistricting just happened here in Georgia, as all over the United States. And our state House representatives drew half of the progressive commissioners out of their districts so that they could not run for re-election. So yeah, no, like the hammer of capital and like white supremacy has been coming down hard. I would say like that, I mean, that's the most stark example of it. But yeah, I mean, like, you see other things. Like, I like had regularly sparred with the police chief publicly before he quit. I don't know why, but things like that. I've gotten like death threats and things like that. So there's like interpersonal like forms of pushback as well as like institutional. Yeah. So yeah, it comes at different scales, comes at different levels and in different ways. But if you're not getting that kind of stuff, like, I thought it was a compliment that they like screwed over half of my friends, because I was like, oh, y'all are really scared of us. That's like a really good sign. Yeah, that's how you know you're doing it. So
have you thought about proactive ways to fight back against that? Or is it just like you have to, like when they push back, you have to push back against you can't anticipate it. I don't know. I've been trying this. Sorry, this is what I've been obsessing over lately. And so
yeah. So I mean, like, I think the it's all about who's focused on the long game. So they made a move that will like benefit them in the short term, and that like they had like Republican candidates lined up to run for all these seats that they gerrymandered because they knew in advance they were going to screw everyone. But that's only going to get them somewhere for like 4 years. And so thinking ahead, like thinking in the long game, like I also, I'm an abolitionist, but even, prison abolition. And so that's like a generational struggle. We've been fighting for like our freedom since they brought us to this continent. Right. And so like, you're thinking longer term, like, okay, so how do I keep raising up the next generation of leaders? How do I do this narrative shifting that's going to plant the seeds for policy change 10 years from now? How do I recruit and like mentor folks that will, be ready to run next election cycle, instead of just getting caught up on what's happening right now? Because they don't see that coming often. They didn't realize 10 years ago when we started pushing for fair, free transit that like we'd all run and win and actually make it happen. And so like, yeah, that's the way to sneak up on them. And also keep hope, keep up that like revolutionary optimism that we can win. So
yeah, well, that's the tough part, maybe.
It's not even pushing back as much as like crawling underground underneath them to later, like, I don't know.
I love that metaphor. Yeah. Okay. So having all this as the base of you now, I want to go back to growing up in Louisville. Is that where you were born?
Yeah, I was born and raised up till I was 17. Yeah.
What is that like? I only know it as a space for like 90s weird indie rock, and I don't know much else.
Yeah. Like My Morning Jacket is from there and stuff. Yeah, it was like weird. It's a city of a lot of like income inequality. And so the world that I knew, like I didn't really know like hip, cool Louisville until like I went back there as an adult. Like I didn't know there was a music scene or like really an art scene. I knew like rich people would like go watch horses once a year. Like, right. Like I didn't really, I to this day, like when people ask me this question, I don't know what to say, because I feel like I didn't get the chance to get to know Louisville growing up. I had like, my friends and my family, and my experiences, I think, that are universal, of just being like a weird kid, just like a weird nerdy kid growing up and just kind of battling through social isolation, that may have come from the fact that my family were transplants, and a lot of the Black community were very interrelated, just like a pretty, like a big family. And so not fully fitting in there, but then the white kids were like, you smell weird. And so like not fitting in there either. And so, but I don't think that's particular to Louisville. That's just kind of like how I grew up over there. So yeah, I mean, that was his life. That was what happened.
I mean, what was your Louisville then, right? You said it was like, you had friends, you had your family, right? Like, was it, I'm holding my hands up to kind of denote like a boundary, but like, was it cloistered? Like, did you only like go within like a certain area of Louisville? Was that your childhood?
Yeah, I would say cloistered. There's like the movie theater that like you would hang out in the parking lot of. Spent a lot of time in Walmart. I don't know why. In like the Waffle House, there was like a few like key spots that like we were at, you know. But yeah, it wasn't until I was like maybe, a little bit, like got out in the world a little bit when I was like 17-ish, you know. But particularly when I came back, I was like, oh dang, like there's a bunch of stuff in Louisville. Oh yeah. So and there was also like the waterfront. We go to like Waterfront Park, and like George Clinton played there one time. I got to like see him live when I was like 16. When I already had this, I had this giant afro back. I have a giant afro, by the way, listeners. Like I was like, 15, and so all the old heads were like, "Oh, you're so cool." I was like, "Thanks, man. You're standing too close to me." So yeah, I had some like key places. But memory is a very interesting thing. I bet like I did more than that, but I also feel like I have this weird amnesia about my childhood that I have never quite understood. But yeah, no, like the strong imprints are of like the very quotidian, like weird places that we would always go, like Walmart.
Yeah. My, teenage years were hanging out in Walmart, going to Blockbuster, and renting a videotape, and then hanging out.
Blockbuster, yeah.
Hanging out in the parking lot there.
Hanging out in the parking lot, yeah.
And then going to watch the movie or playing video games or like, just generally like driving around.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Driving around all the time. Yeah. Yeah. But even with that, like you're experiencing the geography like as a blur between stoplights. And like, I didn't know like, oh wow, what it was like actually culturally to interact in those spaces until I got older, like much older, like left and came back. So
wait, how come you didn't know about this like other part of Louisville?
Well, it's like there are shows places, but you don't know what the bands are like until you go inside, right? Like you don't know like what the art museum is like until you go see the art. And so it's like this vague awareness that like, okay, there is culture, but like actually experiencing its diversity by like being welcome into those spaces, being old enough to like go to like a rock show, or like a hip hop show. It's like a different kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. But I'm trying to figure out, because you called yourself weird, and I'm wondering what you meant by that. Because I'm trying I was weird too.
Oh yeah, I was like very, very raised by the internet. Would come home from school and like be on like Neopets and random forums for like 5 hours until I went to sleep. And so in that environment at home, and then you go to school the next day, and it's like you don't really have any friends to talk with about like, I don't know, this very niche YouTube video you spent 4 hours talking about with like your internet friend in Canada. You just don't know how to social in real life, in like the meat space. So that probably explains why I got into drugs in high school. Cause I was like, I gotta figure out how to be friends with people somehow. Maybe if I smoke weed, that'll like make it easier.
Was that really the thought process?
Not the thought. No, that wasn't like the thought process, but it's like a almost visceral response to like my anxiety as like in social situations. I'm like, I gotta do something. And like you hear of the mystique of like drugs, like, oh, that like I heard, like I see in the movies that like that's what you do to be social. Yeah, I think it's the same kind of pressure anyone feels, but like that would explain it. My particular like magnetism to that kind of thing.
Yeah. So, okay, this is why I'm trying to figure this out, because like my own weirdness, I was also like kind of unself-aware. So I had friends, and I had enough friends that I didn't feel like I didn't have any like pressures to like change myself. Besides like sometimes like if I was too weird in school, I would like later be like, maybe I should rein that in a little bit. Maybe I shouldn't talk about the tick or whatever, in public. But
yeah, I feel like I tried to be cool. I just like literally couldn't get with it. Like I would try to like wear what people wore and like, just fit in, and I just like was really bad at it. I don't know why. So, but I do think there's some like the racial tensions I was talking about like probably played more of a role into it than like I even to this day reckon with.
Oh, well, like how white was your school?
My school it's probably like 80% white. Yeah. And so, they're like, yeah. So like everyone was very cliquish in general, but on racial lines. And so like I feel like this was like before like liking anime was like a very like mainstream thing in Black culture. And so like that kind of shit, I was like, the hell is wrong with you, sis? Like what? And then I mean, white kids just being like racist, so.
Yeah. So I mean, I can only see this through like the lens of my wife, who like was like one of like 6 Black women. I was just saying women, but people, I think, at her school.
Jeez Louise.
And I know kind of what a number it did on her.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of curious, like, did smoking weed, did that help both your anxiety, and did you find some kind of place in your school with these other people?
I mean, I think it ultimately made it worse because I never learned how to socialize without like drugs. And so like, there's obviously like a neurophysiological like impact of like if you're leaning on that like every single day, and then sometimes you are going to have to be sober, and then like just not knowing how to handle that situation, sort of reinforcing your sense of like inadequacy, like social isolation, etc. So kind of like not a great spiral. But it did work. Like I finally like found some friends. Oh, they were like using me because I sold weed, but like that's fine. Like I had like my crew and stuff. It was cool. So went to parties and things. So that was nice.
Was it good? I always hated parties when I was, because this is the thing. This is why I'm saying like I was weird, and I just knew that like, oh, the things that these other people like are not the things that I like. And there's like a handful of people that like I get along with, but most of these other people, and I felt strange when I was around them.
Yeah, I just felt like it was what you were supposed to do. Like I was like constantly trying to figure out like, okay, how do I be like other people? And so like I didn't even like register like not enjoying going to giant parties and stuff, because there's huge risk involved with like drinking copiously as a 16-year-old, like driving around drunk or whatever, or getting caught by somebody's parents. It's like not smart or like chill anything about it. And so it's just like, all right, like gotta do the thing to like be cool and be like normal and be like everyone else. So
did you get caught?
Was like drinking?
I guess anything.
Oh dear, I'm not really gonna get into. I got like like Child Protective Services called on my family one time, but never like I don't know. So we don't have to get into all that.
Sure.
Yeah, we can just come back to that a different day.
I don't want to push you. Anything you're comfortable with. I'm just kind of curious about like at what point did you start to realize that who you were was okay?
Still figuring it out. Like, I don't know, like literally probably when I started making music, which was like, I was like 24. So, like literally until, because even in college, like I had already set myself up on this like depression spiral of just like never having learned how to cope. And also like academically perfectionist. And so like, that's the only thing that like, I really felt like, oh, okay, that's what I get validated for, is like having good grades. And so like beating myself over the head to try to accomplish that. And it's really until I started rapping, where I was like, you know what, I'm actually dope as hell. And like, don't care that I don't like that. I can't understand what the rules are.
Do you mind walking me through what led up to you discovering this? Like how did you even start rapping?
Yeah, so I mean, I studied like literature and stuff in college, and so I started like doing slam poetry in college. So I would go to poetry slams. I think like one of them or something, and then I also started freestyling. So I grew up around freestyle, but like as like kind of a nerdy like femme in like a very like black male dominated space, I just like kind of sat on the sidelines and I'll like jot down my like rhymes in my notebook, but like wouldn't tell anyone and stuff like that. And so I got in college in more of like a creative, like a diverse creative writing environment, diverse in terms of genre. It was also still pretty wide, but playing with like sonnets and stuff like that. And so and also having like a literary culture. So I found like an outlet through that. And freestyling, like me and my homie like Mateo, like locking ourselves in his dorm bathroom to just like rhyme terribly for several months of weekends until it was like, okay, we're pretty good. Let's like go rap at the campfire and see if they like it. So there was like that, but it wasn't until I moved to Athens where I was like, I'm making music. I'm doing it. Through a combination of like discovering A$AP Rock and just again like hitting probably my lowest low emotionally and being like, okay, I gotta do something. This is untenable. So
what was that moment where like you were like, this is like, I gotta do something else?
So I remember distinctly, so we'll start with A$AP Rock. I remember distinctly the moment that like Spotify started automatically like playing one of his songs. I was like in the computer lab in the basement of the linguistics department. And I was like, I like stopped. I was like, bruh, to myself, like you are allowed to make rap music that's like this. Like, I just like literally didn't know that you were allowed to like make rap songs about like your mom not letting you leave the dinner table because you won't eat your vegetables and stuff like that. I was like, what? That's crazy. That's great. And also, you know, I got dumped by like my first boyfriend, who I kind of like had moved to Athens to like be with. And so I was like doing a lot of drugs still. And so like, I was like, man, my parents would be really sad if I killed myself. So like, I'm going to create a new persona and just like start making hip hop and playing hip hop shows. So I like went and, you know, the bar I was also working at the time, I just like went and asked them if I could like book a hip hop show. And they're like, sure, I don't know. We don't really do that, but whatever. And, I wanted to book Dope Knife, who is now my podcast co-host, but like I was just like a big fan and like really wanted to bring him to Athens, and he couldn't play, so I was like, well, shit, I guess I'll play. So I had to write a whole set's worth of material in the 2 months between booking and playing that show. But yeah, so those are the things.
I want to come back to this moment, but it takes so much confidence. And I'm curious about, because if you're rapping, there's nothing to hide behind really, right?
Yeah.
Like when I was in a band, if I fucked up something, I could hide behind my guitar or something. Like there was always like, or like the other members of the band, there was always like some place to hide. I remember I was in a comedy duo when I first started doing comedy, and he was really good at writing rhymes, and we wrote like a couple songs together, and we perform them live, and I was terrible. And it was just like I couldn't hide it. I could record something and it was okay. It was passable.
But so you were terrible. Did you stop after that?
Yes.
See, that's the thing. I was trash, but I just kept going because it was so much fun. Like to have this hip hop show where like all these different kinds of people were there, and I was meeting like beatsmiths and b-boys and like getting into rap battles and losing terribly. But I was like, wow, that was really fun. I like kept going. And so that's the thing. Like you're right. I still struggle to this day with the fact that, yeah, when you are an MC on stage, there's nothing to hide behind at all. Like it might make me feel a little better if my DJ's with me, but like, otherwise, it's all kinetics, theatricality, beats, and rhymes. That's it. There's no bassist, no drummer, anything. So I still this day, like I'm leaving on tour tomorrow, and I'm like, fuck, like it's just gonna be me up there. Like I hope they like it. I hope it's good enough. You know, I gotta get my like you know, my beat pad like skills up this evening so that they don't boo me off stage in Birmingham tomorrow. But yeah, no, that never goes away. But what goes away is like, even if this is terrible, like I will survive. Like it's not going to kill me.
Sure.
It'll be a hilarious story later. Like it's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. But how did you push past that? That's what I'm curious about. How did you push past? Was it an emotional thing? Was it just like a existential thing? Was it just so fun? Like what was it that helped you push past the like, oh, I'm not great at this, but maybe I can be, or I don't know, I'm putting words in your mouth.
I mean, I was very lucky in that, you know, by the time I got to Athens, I made a lot of friends in Athens. So I had a lot of friends who came out to the show who probably like told me I did great, even though I absolutely did not. And so, even that, like encouragement alone was enough to be like, okay, like, let's do this again. But mostly just like filling a room with people, because there wasn't hip hop shows in downtown Athens like back then. It was still very de facto segregated, despite, you know, being a very world renowned in some respects like music scene. It's very white music scene, and so like to have a room full of people who also loved hip hop like was such a new experience to me as someone that like didn't go to hip hop shows growing up. Like I was never outside of like family reunions. I was like rarely in an environment like that, and so that alone was like, wow, this is, you know, super cool. So it wasn't like I didn't just keep going because I wanted to keep making music. I also wanted to keep like fostering that community through giving other people the opportunity to rap, to meet each other, all that kind of stuff. So,
So you said your parents were transplants to Louisville.
Yeah.
Where did they come from?
so my extended family is all from North Carolina. All from North Carolina, yeah.
And why did they go to Louisville?
Oh, for work. My dad worked for UPS, and so like they just like plopped him there. They have like a huge hub there or something, and so that's where we all went. And then my extended family still lives in North Carolina to this day. Well, my mom lives with me now. It's like watching a baby in the other room right now. But yeah, everybody still lives out there. But that's kind of what brought us to Louisville.
He's a pilot, right? For
Yeah, he's
UPS?
a pilot. Yeah.
What does that practically mean? Was he gone?
Oh,
a
like
lot?
I never saw him. Yeah, he was gone all of the time. Yeah, so I mean that's cool. Like provide for the family. That's what's up. But like, no, he was like not around very much. So that's,
you were. I mean, you were.
fine.
So up till that, I mean, your parents got divorced, right? If I'm
Yeah, they
remembering
did,
correctly. Up till they got divorced, you were de facto raised by your mom, and then you were raised by your mom pretty much after that, right?
Somewhat, yeah. So raised by my mom pretty much. Dad in and out. We'd go play soccer at the park on the weekends, but like he was very much gone a lot of the time. And then sort of rocky, like parental, divorce fallouts sometimes then turn into like, what's it? Just. It doesn't go well. The people don't like each other anymore, and it shows. So, I mean, I did live with her for most of that, but I did go back and forth somewhat in between households at that time, yeah.
Do you know how or if you did at all change through the divorce?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I absorbed a lot of the like tensions between like my parents, and so like I think that definitely had an effect on me, somewhat feeling responsible for the tensions because a lot of the arguing was about us and things like that. So I think that also like shaped, in addition to like internet culture, like shaped some of my early anxiety of like feeling like I was the glue holding these people who hate each other together.
Oh yeah, that's heavy.
Yeah.
So practically, like, what was your life like when you were younger, like before your parents got divorced?
Again, I don't have really strong memories of childhood, but like, yeah, like we played soccer. So a lot of it was like going to soccer practice and stuff, hanging out with my brothers. So like watching Dragon Ball Z and like running around the yard and hitting each other with pool floaties or whatever. Yeah. So all that kind of stuff. And then like, I don't know, like I spent a lot of time by myself reading books, writing poems. I wanted to be a writer like my whole entire life. And so it's funny that this is what that ended up being for me. And so, yeah, just kind of like a somewhat solitary kid, hanging out with my brothers a lot. I was like, I kept to myself a lot at home, I think, but I was also very outgoing. I was like very like slapstick in my early humor as like a 7-year-old of just doing wild, silly stuff a lot. So, that's cute.
Like what? Like pratfalls? Like what do you mean?
I don't know, like just doing silly dances in the Ponderosa or whatever. Like,
So were you self-aware, or were you just like were you like, I know I'm doing something silly because it'll make people laugh, or was it just like you were kind of like,
yeah, I liked making people laugh. That made me feel good. So I did weird stuff to like get some chuckles.
Yeah. No, I identify with that as someone who eventually found their way into comedy. Yes. I'm kind of curious. So like, when do you start understanding like the political situation? When do you start thinking about like going into linguistics? I guess the larger question I have in my mind is, if you said you wanted to be a writer, like that was like an early kind of like existential desire that you had. Did you start organizing your life in order to achieve that goal? Or was it just like this kind of inchoate want that like lived inside of you that you had to excavate eventually?
Well, as I got older, I realized all the different things that could mean. So like I wanted to write like adventure stories like growing up and like poems. And then I got into like high school and it was like, oh, it's really fun to write like a good essay. That's cool. Or, in college, like, oh, wow, it's cool to like do journalism. I also worked for the student newspaper briefly. And so just realizing the many different places in your life where that can fit, like, helps me like just find pleasure in whatever I did. Because almost everything involves communication, right? And, like, literacy of some kind. And so, like, leveraging that. If I'm like trying to get out of trouble with like my advisor, I'm just like, how do I write like a really like detailed email to explain why I didn't turn my paper in on time? All those sort of like small opportunities to like write well and feel like pat myself on the back about that. But you also mentioned like, how did I get into like politics, right? Like, where all that
how did you
from?
understand it? I think that's the deeper thing that I'm trying to think about. Like, how do you start being aware of, because it's all invisible, right? And you start once you're like in it, you start to see like the structures of like how things work.
Yeah, right. So early on, I mean, I was very into activism even when I was like very young. I remember like some of my few distinct memories growing up. Like, I would like lay awake at night crying because I just like knowing homeless people was a thing. And like, I definitely like jumped on any like injustice train I would discover on the internet and get super into it. So like, I fell down like a rabbit hole, no pun intended, of like PETA, like, people for the ethical treatment of animals, and like got super into like fighting animal cruelty, which I would sometimes go and like picket the KFC like by our house. So like, so things like that without like a systemic, what kind of systemic understanding or what kind of political framework for like why this is all the case can you have when you were 14, right? I went and like canvassed for Obama when I was like too young to vote. Cause like having a black president is cool. But not really understanding of like, why haven't we had a black president yet? Like, really, why? Not just like racism, but like how does racism function and systemically? And also, why is not having a black president like not the solution like that we think it's going to be, etc. Like, it wasn't until really, unfortunately, like a lot of people were politically awakened with like the Trump presidency, and so that's kind of like where I like jumped into action. But over the ensuing years, particularly throughout the course of the pandemic, starting to really develop like a systems understanding of like, oh, this is not only why animal cruelty in like the poultry industry is a thing, but also why there's homeless people, and also why there's crime, and also why people get evicted, and also why our schools are like this, like kind of under like a coherent umbrella.
When you first started to, like when you were younger, like say get into PETA or, understand, if not understand homelessness, at least have empathy for people who are unhoused, right? What were those early moments? Do you remember like what it was that like got you? Yeah,
just the news. Like, my parents would watch the news in the evening and like just hearing about this or that thing. And it just like, I've always just been a deeply emotional person in terms of my responses to learning things. And so, I would just like hear about or like drive and see someone who's unhoused and just be like, ask my mom like, oh, who's that? And like hearing the explanation of like, you mean this person like lives outside and doesn't have friends and family and is cold right now? Just like that wrecking me for like a whole day. And so, but just like responses to like injustice I saw in my community or like saw on the news, stuff like that. And being like a nosy kid, like all of us, like, Mom, like, why? Whatever,
Yeah. I think, and I have a very anecdotal, and it's just a theory. I don't have much evidence beyond a gut instinct that there's a deep connection between someone's ethics and someone's aesthetics.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean like, obviously, like awful people write very good things or make very good things, right? So I don't exactly, this is why I'm like, I don't have a good understanding of it, but I'm kind of curious about, how you started to understand morality, even just divorced maybe from political kinds of things. Were you taught like, ethics as a kid, or what is ethically correct?
I think so. It's just like, human suffering and like, suffering and animal suffering as well, as we've talked about, is bad. Like, is, and like then, and that you can do something about it. I just got messages of that and encouragement, perhaps in like following which was like, arguably an innate feeling in myself of just like deep pain when I heard others were in pain and suffering. And so just encouragement to like follow that with action or like unpack my, feelings around it and develop, more sympathy, more like sense of solidarity. But yeah, it wasn't like, I didn't like, oh, you can do something about it. It's such a vague way to understand what your response should be, which I did not develop until I was much older. Unfortunately, maybe like 5 years ago, like maybe like 3 years ago, frankly. 5 years is generous.
Do you know, like, in yourself what that connection is? Maybe I can just pointedly ask you, and we can fumble around trying to figure it out. Like, between your ethical beliefs and, besides, I mean, it becoming like subject matter in your songs, right? Do you have you thought about it at all?
About ethics?
And your aesthetic beliefs. You're like, how should a song or how should an essay be arranged or whatever? Like, again, I'm fumbling with this stuff because I don't have any good answers, but I'm kind of curious if maybe other people have thought about it.
I mean, I don't know if this answers your question, but like a central tension in my songwriting is like, what is okay to say? What's okay to talk about? And it's something that like I try to like explain to rationalize to myself as like a way that, because it's particularly, so this question comes up particularly in like, needing political power to impact change and like the degree to which like I should censor myself in order to like accrue more power to help people. Like how much is it self-serving to like kneecap my like political, like capital? Like how much is that selfish versus like, should I just like say nothing and stand at the side, just like bottle it all up if that's going to put me in a position where I can help more people. So that I guess that's like an aesthetic ethic tension in my work. And that I try to, like I was starting to say, rationalize by thinking about the coalition I've built thus far of like weirdos and outcasts and like folks that never thought and still sometimes don't think that they like belong in politics or can enact any kind of change, bringing them in by being like, yeah, I was addicted to Adderall or like whatever, to destigmatize or also just dispel the myth that like politicians are perfect. All these same people did the exact same shit I did in college. Like Obama wrote about like sniffing coke in like his autobiography after the fact. Like, he wasn't, like, oh, I was the president already. I can like put this little wink in there and no harm done. Nobody, like very few people are open about, they just try to hide it, like to keep power. And so I think that is unethical. Ultimately, that is my answer to that question. But I also see like what utility it holds for building power, and not just my own power. If I get kicked out of office because I rapped about crazy shit, then fine. But like, how is this building power for other people by like empowering them to see themselves as a potential agent of change?
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I find that to be a central tension in my own either writing or even like, talking on a podcast. Like, what can I talk about? I mean, this is I'm a little more free because it's just me, but like I do a podcast with my wife and she's, much more famous than I am. And so I can't really, there is a limit to like what I can say because I don't want to hurt her. And I mean, she believes a lot of the same things I believe. Yeah. But like, it's just on a different level than me. And so if I say certain things that could hurt her, but also like, I know kind of what you're saying. I feel the same kind of tension. Yeah.
You kind of know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. We're towards the end, but I kind of want to go back to talk about your mom a little bit because she was a singer, right?
Yeah. She was a gospel singer growing up and then like a little trio with her sisters who then in adulthood, in my like early adolescence, were backup singers for a beach music band. So I would like tour the Carolina coast with them like in the summers at times. Watching them play, harmonizing in the car with them. That's kind of where I got some of my like beat aesthetic as well as like my shower singing game up a little bit.
So you had, I mean, I don't like drawing linear connections on this show, but sometimes they jump out at me and I'm like, at the very least, you had a direct example in your life of someone making music and touring behind it that you could see, oh, this is a possibility for me.
Yeah.
Before you.
Yeah, I guess so. I never really thought about that I did have like a musician in my family that like made it somewhat of a career of it, not like enough money to live, but just like enough money to pay for going on a little vacation, right? So there was that model in my life. I mean, I guess to be clear, like I didn't set out to make music as a career. It just like was a fun thing. It's like, oh wow, it's starting. I guess it's the same thing. Like, oh wow, it's starting to pay for itself. That's kind of cool. And then ultimately, like pre-pandemic, like I was, if I hadn't been a commissioner, I would have just done music full time. But yeah, it's weird how that happens. But it's interesting. I really actually never thought of the fact that was like a precedented thing in my personal history that like may have inspired me to go for it more.
I mean, when you started making music and touring behind it, did anything ever like from that time in your life jump out at you? Or did you like realize that like, oh, this is just like when I was on tour with my mom or something like that?
Not at all. That's so weird. Like literally this is a revelation. I didn't have any like flashbacks to like being in the car or anything. It just kind of seemed like it's, I guess, out of a sense of like, oh, I'm forging my own path. Like, we that's such a pervasive myth in American culture. Like, oh, like I'm a self-made man. I'm just going out here doing my thing. Like, no, everyone gets somewhere with other people. And so, yeah, damn, shame on me for like not drawing that connection before. Like,
no,
the ghouls, the media, they brainwashed me. I'm still trying to get free, but I'm not yet.
I have very similar things, and I'm wondering if this is the same for you. But like, I also don't remember a lot from my childhood, and only through therapy have I started to. I'm going to use the word recover, but I don't mean like I have like hit it.
Recover the memories.
But what I mean is that like I was very like my emotions were very tamped down. At some point, I realized that like I was a very emotional kid, and it felt weird to me. And so like I naturally kind of like started tamping that down and becoming alienated, I think, from my emotions.
Yeah.
And only in adulthood have I started to like reconnect and become more of a like full person and more of a unified person.
Mm-hmm.
And in doing that, I started to like realize like, oh, I remember when this happened and I remember when this happened. But before that, it was just like, my past would be, and unless something was so emotional, like when my grandmother died or something like that, then it just didn't like stick in my head. And I'm wonder if that was like something, if that is similar for you, or like if you've thought about like where that amnesia-ishness comes from.
I mean, it could just be that like, your strongest emotional experiences like imprint themselves into your memory more powerfully than like the rote aspects of your life that like kind of cohere into these patterns that you think would be strong enough to be like a thread in your memory, but like somehow don't end up being. So yeah, I really strongly remember like when my mom would take me to the bookstore in the mall, and I would like sit looking at the books on the shelves for like hours, and then feel physically sick when we got in the car because I was so overwhelmed by the amount of different things like that can be and that you can write about, and just like the amount of information I absorbed. So like those really strong emotional reactions to things, like laying awake at night thinking about like unhoused folks. Like why is like that is a random ass memory, but it was a really strong emotional memory for me. I remember I one time left my big bird, like stuffed animal, out in the rain, and it got like worms in it or whatever, and my parents threw it away, and like to this day it haunts me. Like it's really weird small things like that to which I had a very strong emotional reaction that like stick out to me in my mind the most. For some reason, like the everyday patterns like never really did. So
were you in touch with your emotions throughout your entire life, or did you, like my dialectical existential thing was that like I did tamp them down and then had to like kind of like bounce back when like logical, unemotional Andy was not functioning well at the world?
Yeah, no, I think that's a part of what happened to me in high school when I sort of lost my way, one might say, is that like when I was like, oh snap, like, oh man, I'm like weird, and like it's been showing for long enough that like I'm becoming an adult, because I'm 14. So what am I gonna do to like reel all of this in? Because can't be like, crying in, at school anymore. And so, yeah, I think that's part of why like I got very into like smoking weed and other things, because I was like, maybe this will help, maybe this will help me feel less. It wasn't like a conscious decision, but definitely that's something that was happening. And when you push it down, like it just grows roots and sort of like seeps into the groundwater and stuff. And so that, caused problems. But yeah, similar thing as an adult, like I finally like let that stuff surface instead of like constantly, like, I'm mixing metaphors, but I'm about to be like culling the weeds. Like, okay, which one is it? And yeah, a lot healthier. Life's good.
Yeah.
Yay.
Wait, did you say that you had gotten sober?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, I'll have like these days I'll like have a glass of wine, but I don't feel impelled to like drink until I like black out. So that's great.
Was that around the time that you started making music for real?
Oh, drinking myself to death?
No, like
no.
sober.
This was over the course of the pandemic, really. Even after I first got in office, the pressure was so great, and I wanted so desperately to feel normal that as like a 26-year-old elected official, I still went out a great deal and like drank like more than I should have.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, it really wasn't until like 2020 when like there weren't bars open to go to that I like got not only I like was forced to get it together, and then discovered that was part of why I was so miserable. It's like, oh wow, you were anxious all the time because like you don't have any nutrients in your body because you drank until 2 a.m. last night and stuff like that. So like, wow, I'm like not as depressed anymore, and like, yeah, and that's what brought me out of it. I was like, oh wow, this is like, these aren't inherent things to me. This is a product of like my lifestyle. Interesting.
Have you written anything since getting soberish?
Oh, I mean, like Bell Ringer. I mean, like, well, I guess I wrote it. Yeah, I mean, I started writing in 2018, but like Sometimes I Hate This Town, which you haven't heard yet, but it's all about like psychiatry and like trying to get well, in which I like analyze other influences on my mental health over the last couple years. I've written stuff, but I haven't really talked about that a great deal, other than like 12 out of the 13 songs on the album talk about death in some way. Not always in a bad way, but like, sometimes it's like, revolutionary suicide, Huey Newton-esque things, or just like, talking about the folks that we've lost on our way. But no, like I've carried forward that like obsession with mortality that comes with being very depressed, where you're like, your mind kind of wanders in a bad way, to now thinking about just like the role of human loss in formation of movements and cycles of trauma that perpetuate violence and all this stuff. So, but I haven't written specifically about like, I was depressed and drinking very heavily.
Yeah, no, I was just wondering if like your process changed, or if the way that you write or the way that you connect with your creative self changed at all through this.
I would say so. I would say that like the process became more automatic, in that like I could say more because the tools, I wasn't as clumsy with the tools of writing anymore, of stressing for 6 months over like, is this like lyrically dense enough? Is this cadence good? Do these rhymes work? Instead, I'm just like, I got this, it's fine. And so when you don't worry about that, you can focus more on like content. Right. You can say a lot more.
Okay, final question. Okay. What was creativity like for you when you were a kid?
So I would push myself to write all the time. Like I would have like 4 lines left on the page. And so I'd like put a line, like, mark off a new section and like write a 4-line poem to like fill the page. I was like obsessed with just getting stuff out there. And so, yeah, I'd be inspired by random various things. These emotional responses I would like turn into poems and stuff. Inspired by music. So like when like emo became a thing, I was like write really moody, like whatever. So like also responding to like the cultural milieu and zeitgeist at the time or whatever. But I would just because there wasn't like Twitter to like scroll in the 5 minutes between like when you're waiting for, you're sitting in the lobby of the Ponderosa and when you get seated at your table. So I'm like, I got 5 minutes to write a poem all the time.
Thank you so much for joining me.
Absolutely,
what a delight.
It's super fun. Yeah, I'd love to come back sometime. Let me know.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll see you next time. Bye. Bye, oh, 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 bye.